ScionCraft. Hi, I'm Zugzwang, and for the first time I'm actually joined by another human being instead of talking to myself. I'd like to welcome and introduce our fearless leader on this journey, Sigmar. You might recognize the name as I've had the pleasure of casting one of his games before. Sigmar is a devoted Scion Custom Races player and a former ESL caster. Sigmar has been influential in playtesting and with a number of balance patches. And now, because he's insane, he wants to help introduce and teach us a little bit about the Scion races.
Hello everybody, thank you for such a nice introduction, Zach. I do think that I am a little bit insane being so dedicated to this mod, but I'm glad we can do this.
Let's start talking about the Genetron then. What is the first thing that someone new to Genetron needs to wrap their head around in order to play it?
Well, first of all, I would say that you need to have a pretty good macro, like basic stuff. Like when I started playing StarCraft, I was following these tutorials that told me that just build SCVs and Marines, SCVs, Marines, supply depots, or probes and pylons, etc. So basically, there's no magical macro mechanic for the Genetron, just plain old normal production. So you need to be able to like hit your production cycles, produce nonstop, just producing workers and units, and just be good at it.
Big is better.
Yep.
What about uploaders then? That's a feature that players new to Genetron really kind of need to get their grasp on.
So the uploader is a building that's a part of Genetron's identity. Basically, it's like an add-on for Genetron buildings that works kind of like TechLab, kind of like Reactor, but not really. Basically, what uploader does is it's being connected to the Genetron production structures, it being manufacturer, fabricator, and assembly array. And once the uploader is connected, depending on the number of uploaders connected to the building, and you can have up to 3. More advanced units are being unlocked, but also for every single uploader you get a 33% of boosted production rate.
That's huge.
Meaning that that's huge. Meaning that at 3 uploaders, not only you have most units unlocked because you also need like other structures, but also you produce at 200% rate, meaning that all of your units are being produced extremely fast.
I've seen some people put uploaders on, and they're not even using it for unlocking higher tech. They're just using it to get the extra speed.
Yep. I don't know about like manufacturers because cost-wise, because the uploaders are costing like 50 gas per one. You would probably be better off constructing more manufacturers to produce more Spitfires, which is the only mineral-only unit Genetron has. But for other buildings, I think it would be just better to have like 1 or 2 assembly arrays with 3 uploaders connected to produce like mass Badgers, for example. Badger, of course, being the tier 3 unit, flying unit that Genetron has.
Oh yes, we'll definitely talk about the Badgers. But before we do, I want to ask about the Zyad. GVX is probably the most classic Scion matchup. If you're playing Genetron and going up against an unknown Zyad player, what should you be keeping in mind?
So like composition 101 is that you need to have a composition of units that play well, like also economy-wise. Not only like they fight well together, but also your economy needs to support all of it. So basically what that means is you choose a gas-heavy unit or units you want to be like the most important part of your composition, and then because all your gas is spent, you try to have like low gas or no gas units to supplement the composition, you know. And for Zaid, there are 2 units that can fill that role, and it's the Zaidling and the Roamer, with Zaidling costing no gas and with Roamer costing like 25 gas. Also, the Scorpolisk, I think, only costs 25 gas, but it's kind of like more specialistic unit, I would say. So for the most part, you're dealing with Zaidlings or Roamers, which both are light units, right? So in the Genetron's arsenal, the best unit to deal with light, small ground units is the Inciter. So I would suggest just adding some Inciters or even a lot of Inciters to your composition, because Inciter, the feared Batmobile of Genetron, is a pretty good. Yeah, the Batmobile, okay. It's a pretty awesome unit when it comes to dealing with huge masses of small light units because it has like double damage, double AoE damage versus light units.
And on top of that, it's splash. I mean, the worker kills alone are insane.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so if you see Zayed, you should be thinking maybe get myself a Batmobile.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, same question then, but with respect to the Chiron. Let's say you're going up against an unknown Chiron player. What should you be thinking about in the back of your head?
Okay, so that's actually a pretty similar case because the easiest way for the Chiron to get like more supply, and we must remember that they get supply from the production structures, is to build like more edifices and more sanctums. And because like edifices produce basic small cheap units that also cost no gas, them being volts and pariahs, costing only 50 minerals each, we can expect that the Chiron's composition will have a lot of these units. And also because they are both small and light, the same applies here. So Insider seems to be a pretty good choice versus like mass Chiron units, you know?
Yep.
I saw some players like Caranellos who like try to concentrate on building other units than the edifice units. For example, he was amassing the subjectors, which are armored, so the insiders are pretty bad against them. But otherwise, I have seen most players I have seen massing vaults or pariahs, depending on the player, and both of these units are basically dying to the insider fire.
Yeah, I guess we should put a disclaimer on this. Do your own scouting and determine what the right composition is. But if when all else fails, give some thought to that Batmobile. I guess we should close the loop on this question then. Let's say you're going into a GVG at Genetron versus Genetron. What kinds of issues in unit compositions would you be thinking about?
Okay, so this is the matchup I have the most experience with, as a Genetron, because my main sparring partner was also playing Genetron. So I think I had the matchup figured out, and I was very wrong. Like we came to a conclusion that like the best composition for the Genetron in Genetron versus Genetron would be like Spitfire Teslas, with maybe some air openers like Hornets for harassment or maybe the Jupiter for harassment, but then like Spitfires and Teslas all day long. But then the Scion tournament happened recently, and one of the players, Jotek, shoutouts to him, basically like rolled me over with Virtuses and Jupiters as a main part of his composition. So, well, it seems like, you know, I may claim that I played like 60 or 70 GVGs in the last 2 months, but still, like, the meta game and the compositions are like not figured out exactly. So my like our little inbred meta of just like up to 4 players playing with each other, mostly two, was like we figured out like to play this way. We got our conclusions in our sparring group, but it seems like we are not really correct. And Jotak shown us that other stuff is also viable, right? So I think it all comes down to more games, more experience, some experimentation. I can definitely say that I like more gas-heavy technological openers. I started with playing like manufacturer into expansion into 2 more manufacturers, but it seems like these kind of openers don't have really a lot of tools to deal with some more specialistic stuff like the air harassment, for example.
Yes.
So nowadays I just open with manufacturer into gas into fabricator and then figure stuff out from here. Maybe fast expand or maybe going for some harassment from the Hornets or this kind of stuff.
Well, here's to the evolving meta then. That's what I love about the Scion races right now, is the extent that it's not been figured out. But let me ask you this then, since we're talking about things that can surprise us. If I'm a Genetron player and I enjoy cheesing my opponents, what sorts of things, what kind of tools should I be thinking about?
So actually, cheesing with Genetron is like pretty all-in-ish because like you can of course proxy your buildings, but you are not a Terran, so your production structures do not fly. So when you like proxy buildings, they will stay there all game long. So as soon as the cheese is defended, like the early rush, say to manufacturer in the proxy position producing Spitfires. Once the push is defended, you will probably lose the buildings because you just cannot make them fly and escape, you know? So that's all-in-ish. And the second part is also if you want to like produce some high-tech unit from proxy positions, you need to not only construct a production building in a proxy position, but also uploaders, which costs a lot of money. So for example, say you want to construct like proxy insiders. You need to produce a fabricator in proxy position with 2 uploaders, and once the rush is done with, if the opponent is not dead, you will probably lose a lot of money and a lot of production because probably he will go for the fabricator and the uploaders and destroy them, and you just cannot do anything about it really.
Is it worth the extra 25 seconds that it saves you moving the unit across the map?
See, that's the part of the game I didn't really do a lot of experimentations with. Like I conducted 2 successful insider rushes, but I think they were successful only because it was like the first time I was doing it versus an opponent, so he was totally caught off guard. But like once the matchup is more figured out, people will probably have a sense of when a building should be up, and maybe like for scouting positions, just expecting there to be some proxy. So I think like for an unprepared opponent that never faced this strategy, it might be pretty strong, but for an opponent that knows what he's doing and knows the matchup, it's probably not that good.
Well, I guess as long as my mind is drifting towards the cheddar, I should ask, how do I as a Genetron player get detection? And what are the best ways to defend myself from cloaked banshees and DTs and lurkers and everything else?
So basically, most of the Genetron detection is gated behind the structure, being the equivalent of the engineering bay. I think it's called outfitting station.
It is, yep.
And that unlocks your missile turrets called the interdictor, I believe. So the interdictor is the basic anti-air static defense that has the detection. But it also unlocks the processing drone from the processing core, being the main building of Genetron. And the processing drone is a small flying, very fast unit that also has energy, and it can spend like 50 or 75 of energy to turn into a detector for like, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds maybe. I don't really know all the numbers. It's pretty good because you got them early on, you can scout with them, and if need be, they can turn into detection. Also, there's a late game upgrade in the analysis terminal, the fusion core equivalent. And there's an upgrade that makes the processing drone be a detector all day long, meaning
Permanent.
they don't require energy. Yep.
So if I scout an opponent and I don't see an outfitting station and they've skipped it, they're vulnerable to a cloaked attack.
Yep, exactly.
And if I'm playing Genetron, is there a way to take advantage of that?
If you're playing Genetron, I saw some players, not in the most recent tournament, but in some like historic VODs. I saw some players like rushing Teslas and pushing with a single Tesla, but not with a shock charge, but with the cloaking charge. So I think there is a possibility for you to like make an early push with a completely invisible army because you just throw down the invisible charge or like the cloaking charge from the Tesla. Because otherwise, your units cannot be cloaked really, apart from like Jupiter in high speed when you've got the cloaking tech already done, or the transporter unit, which, as we said, is not really used that much.
And there's that speed cloak ability on the blades.
I even forgot about this unit because I think I've never used it really. But yeah, there's a small unit called the Blaze, which is kind of like a firebat, kind of like a hellbat. It's a mechanical kind of flamethrower robot, and it has this ability that makes it move faster and also be cloaked for like 2 seconds.
It's pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, maybe like I cannot really say because I didn't use it that much, but I think the ability has some potential because it makes you able to engage easily. It makes you like be able to just jump into enemy mirror line and kill workers, and also because it gives you a speed boost and also the cloaking. Probably it makes the unit not so all-inish because like once Hellbat get in, they probably won't get out. But with this ability, perhaps the Blaze can like disengage and run.
Yeah, you kind of have a choice. It's either a kamikaze unit where it speed cloaks in and gets the kills, or you can slip in and speed cloak out.
Yep, exactly.
Sigmar, you surveyed the community to get their thoughts on the Genetron. You did a helpful survey, and I know there was a lot of engagement with that. What did you learn from the results that you got back?
Okay, so there were some contradictory opinions. For example, one person claimed that the Aquillas are overtuned and the Virtuses are undertuned. And then there was Jotek, or Yotek, I think Jotek, that actually said like the Aquillas are terrible and the Virtuses are OP. So the tournament results show us that Jotek was probably in the right, So basically,
he did
as
some
you can
mean
see,
stuff with vertices.
yep, there is some problem like with perception of different units because I was in the club of people believing that Virtus was pretty useless, but recently it got buffed a little bit. Like it regenerates more, it's cheaper, it's faster. So maybe Virtus is now in a good spot, or maybe it is actually overpowered because it's pretty strong. I would still change some things about the unit, but it's pretty strong. But at the same time, as you can see, people are also, I think, maybe overvaluing the Aquilus. Like it's a pretty strong unit, but it runs out of gas pretty fast. It's a unit that requires energy in order to shoot their normal attack. And don't get me wrong, because Aquila's attack hits like a truck, but at the same time it can shoot like I don't want to lie really, but not a lot of times. I think like after 10 seconds they cannot shoot anymore, and they need their energy regenerated, which can be done of course with a processing drones
Yes.
ability that's called energy transfer, I think, which makes the drone just transfer its energy to the Aquilus. You can also autocast it, so it's better now. The autocast was introduced only recently, but it's still a pretty hard unit to really use, I
Yeah,
think.
we don't see a lot of them.
Yeah, exactly. Because, as I said, I tried. I had some success with it, but normally I am starting to use the unit to transition into the unit when I'm already ahead. So for me, it always was like win more unit. But I don't know. I think there might be some clever ways like to transition to Aquila's faster, but they just require so much gas, you know.
It's supposed to sort of fill a role vaguely similar to that of a ghost or a High Templar.
I think like the Aquilas was intended to be like kind of special forces unit. I think it started with like the stun ability is something that the Spectres have from the Wings of Liberty campaign, you know. But still, like Aquilas right now are just heavy damage dealers that require energy. Their stun grenade is pretty useful, but at the same time, once you use the grenade, you have like less shots available because you lost energy. So I don't know. I will probably stick to like them hitting like a truck with their regular attack, probably. Maybe use the one or two stuns from the Achilles on big groups of enemies and then just make it shoot longer.
Well, it really makes me wonder if the future of the Aquila is the skill to use the processing drone to charge up the Aquila and to have strategies to load up your processing cores with energy so you can feed those drones. And really, the Aquila is meant to be the end user of all that accumulating power.
Oh yeah, you know that's one of the problems with Genetron. Like actually, it's kind of like Terran's problem too, because like Terrans have a lot of units that require extensive clicking. Let's call it this way. For example, you need to like siege your tanks, siege your liberators, borrow your mines, this kind of stuff. Transform your Thors, steam, split, run back, drop. You know, there's just a lot of stuff to be done, and the same is true for like Genetron. For example, you would need to micro your processing drones. You would need to micro your Aquilus maybe to use the grenades. Perhaps you're also having like Avengers, and in order for them to be like cost effective, you need to use the Vengeance missile. So that's another thing to be clicked. If you have malls, you need to like borrow your malls, this kind of stuff. So there's just a lot of things to be done.
You have to have the bandwidth to do all of this. You got to
Oh
have
yeah,
you
exactly.
got to have enough APM to be able to manage it all.
Yep, it's not as bad as in Terran's case, but definitely it takes a lot to play the race optimally. Like you need a really high APM in order to be able to do all this stuff. So it's not as bad as Terran's case. For example, like APM and micro required to effectively split your marines, and micro like bio units is far more demanding than what Genetron needs. But still, I think Genetron is the most difficult out of the three Scion races,
Ah.
and that's the reason.
Well, I guess that takes me to sort of a global question I wanted to ask you. In your opinion, what does the future hold for Genetron?
Well, you know, the problem of the Scion races right now is that even if you like figure out the meta on like the our tournament level, which is like maybe high diamond, low masters, maybe higher masters. I know there are some high masters in that competing in this tournament, but you know we are still like no GMs, we are still like no pro gamers, so probably we would need some really high skill people in order to really discover what's possible with the races, you know, because as much as some high masters players can be good at the game, no, they are still no pros, still no like professional StarCraft players, still no like Koreans, and only when, only if we've got like high-level Koreans playing the game, we would learn what's really possible with the races. So, as I said, right now we are in the phase of like discovery and experimentation, and because of the low player base, I think this like phase will really last pretty long.
I kind of love it. It's a bit of a wild west, and you never know quite what to expect.
Yeah, that's true. Like during the tournament, I was really surprised with different strategies. As I said, like my number of sparring partners was pretty limited. So like almost every single match, I was caught off guard with something. Just like it felt like I was playing a completely different game because other new people, new opponents just had their own ideas. With the new races. Yeah, like for example, in that match you casted, so there's this video on Zagzwing's channel, me versus the Caramellos, which is pretty good GVK match.
Oh, that was a fun game.
It was
Thank
the
you.
Yeah, it was a fight game. So that was the first time a Chiron player actually played so subjector heavy versus me, and I had to come up with something because normally I would go for like, as I said, inciters, AOE, destroy the small units, and the rest of the army will deal with the rest. But with Caramellos, when like most of his army were subjectors, I had to improvise something, and this was actually the first game I really went into like what's the unit called? The Equalizer, the anti-armor unit that Genetron has. Uh, Recently, Solstice introduced a buff to the Equalizer. Their like faster shooting mode actually has a lot of range when the tracking munitions upgrade is already done. So basically, the Equalizers could be shooting at the subjectives from like range 10, which is really a lot in
Oh,
StarCraft.
that's huge. All right.
So yeah, it was a success. It was an experiment from me because I had to do something, and I thought, yeah, why not? Let's try it. It was pretty good.
I could see equalizers being pretty handy in some GVGs.
It depends on your composition because like they are mainly an anti-armor unit. Like their fast shooting mode is pretty good versus small units too because it's a small AOE. So it's pretty good versus like Zerglings or Marines maybe. But basically an equalizer is an anti-armor unit. So it depends on Genetron's composition. If somebody goes for heavy blitzer, kind of like a trumpet goes, then
Yeah,
yeah, the equalizer can be pretty good.
that's what I'm
But
thinking of. If
more
you
typically, I'm meeting players who go for like a gas heavy unit and Spitfires all day long because it's the only mineral only unit the Genetron has. So Spitfires is the core of your army anyway.
yeah,
And
okay.
versus Spitfires, Equalizer it's not really that good, I think.
For that, you're going back to the Batmobile.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think Insider would be pretty good versus the Spitfires too.
That actually does remind me. One thing that you and I have talked about before, I know, is that playing Genetron takes up a lot of space. And that can be a challenge on smaller maps or maps with just smaller mains. Can we touch on why that happens and what can be done about it?
Okay, so to answer the question why, it's because Genetron as a race not only needs a lot of buildings, but also the buildings are bigger. Like the manufacturer is the standard size production facility because it's like 3 by 3. But the
Yeah.
fabricator assembly array are 4 by 4, as far as I remember, and that's a like first when it comes to production structures. So not only your production structures are bigger, but also, as I said, in Terran's case, each Terran production structure can only have like one add-on, but then suddenly Genetron needs like three for the building to be like, say, let's call it fully operational. So
Fully
you got bigger
operational.
buildings. Yeah, you've got bigger buildings, and then you also three additional structures that take a lot of space because the uploaders are 2 by 2. And I think maybe in the future some adjustment can be made so that uploader is maybe smaller, like 1 by 1, let's say. Maybe the fabricators and the assembly array could be 3 by 3 instead of 4 by 4, which would also help. But as to answer how to deal with it, you just need, I think, to be pretty clever with your building placement, come up with some nice pattern or SimCity to make it not hinder your gameplay, let's say. But I know it's like easier said than done because during the tournament games I was trying to play so fast. I don't want to concentrate on building placement. I just want to be done with it as soon as possible, and I actually ended up having some units trapped in between buildings, not being able to move out,
Oh, we've all
which
been
was
there.
pretty bad. Yeah, that was pretty bad. But as I said, I want it all to like take a second, not like 5 or 10 seconds, just to be able to deliberately place buildings.
Well, I think of a lot of what we're seeing is that later in the game, Genetron starts building their production facilities outside of the main and outside of the natural.
Yeah, it depends on the map because some maps does have like bigger main base, but if it's a regular size main base, I would say if you got like 3 or more bases, probably it's a good idea to start building your stuff outside of the base. Like also when I played Terran, I also did that when I started to placing my production, like my third base or between my natural and third base, which also like it was also helpful when it came to defending. For example, I created a artificial choke points on the map. You can do the same stuff with Genetron, I think.
Yeah, it's very Terran-like.
Yep.
Now, I want to get into the good stuff. Take advantage and pick your brain a bit here. Can you tell us what are some of the lesser known tricks, combinations, or unused abilities that people may not know about for the Genetron?
Okay, so some curiosities off the top of my head is like you can use the Tesla's electric charge or shock charge to actually uncloak enemy units. Like
Oh,
if
that's
they
cool.
receive damage from the shock charge, they are uncloaked for a couple of seconds. It was something I proposed to Solstice, and I am happy to see that it was introduced to the mod. Another trick is maybe not a trick, just some information that perhaps some people don't know. When you have a borrowed mole unit with the like sensors upgrade,
Oh, yes.
which gives him like the sensor tower shorter radius to detect enemy units on the minimap.
I love that
It
ability.
also it shows you also enemy invisible units, but only if they are on the ground. Like it is not a detection, but you know they are coming. For example, if Dark Templars are coming, because like this is kind of like a seismic receivers, whatever. So the mole knows it is coming because it feels like the earth shaking under the Dark Templar's feet, but it's still not a detector. So you
Yeah.
know it's coming, but you cannot see it.
It won't
That's
attack the DT.
Yeah, it won an identity, but it's pretty cool. Anyway, like pretty flavorful. And another trick, the carrier,
Oh,
courier,
there's a unit we
courier.
never see.
Yeah, the unit we never see, the transporter unit, flying transport unit for the Genetron. The unit has cloak, but it's still pretty boring. But interesting fact is that it has not a typical 8, but 10 cargo charges or cargo spaces.
Oh, it's
So
bigger.
it can actually like transport 5 Spitfires. And this is interesting, you can like load a single Virtus into it and with 2 workers, which will give you a pretty good unit for harassment because the Virtus one-shots enemy workers, and also 2 workers that can immediately start repairing it.
So
So Solstice was like telling me there was a build, like a pretty cheesy build, where you just rushed and dropped Virtus into enemy base and just start shooting at the workers.
so maybe in the future, Virtus drop will become a thing.
Yeah, like I tried it once and it went terribly. I was miserable in that game, so maybe I'll try it in the future. But so far, I'd rather not.
I feel like repair is a big part of Genetron because virtually everything is mechanical and everything's capable of being repaired.
Yep, that's true. That's also like one thing. One disadvantage I think Genetron has is because it doesn't really have any sort of like defenders mechanics. For example, the Protoss have the shield battery, the Zaid have the feeding pool, which can heal nearby units, right? Like the Zerg has queens nearby on creep near their bases, and the Genetron, like the only thing they have is the repair on their units, which is pretty good, but also comes at a pretty huge cost because you need to pull your workers, so you lose mining time. Your
Yes.
workers are easily killed when like in front or just behind units, so they can be sniped. So it's pretty important for like early defense, being able to repair your buildings, your static defense, your units. But at the same time, I think like Genetron needs a little bit more in this department.
All right, I'm going to paraphrase here, but Solstice told me once that Genetron players need to be mindful of two things. They really need the ability upgrades to unlock Genetron's potential. And he also mentioned to me that static defense is really key. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so a lot of Genetron units' potential is gated behind upgrades because probably in the early game, especially, they will be just far too strong in like an all-in type of situation or like early cheese. For example, let's take Spitfire. Spitfire has a speed upgrade called, I think, calibrated engines.
Yep.
which basically is an equivalent for the Zergling speed for Zerg. Like imagine Zergling started with the Zergling speed, metabolic boost. That would be pretty bad. And the same is true for the Genetron and Spitfires. Like Spitfire is a pretty good solid unit, and if it had like its final speed to begin with, the Spitfire all-ins or Spitfire cheeses would be like undefendable, I think. So the Spitfire's strength is really gated behind the upgrade. And in the late game, I think you saw how good Spitfire can be with doing run-bys all day long. From the left, from the right, it's pretty good.
I've never forgotten how Artosis described Zergling speed with the famous double negative. I never not get Zergling speed. Is calibrated engine sort of the same?
Yep, I think like Solstice even said that if you plan on using Spitfires, not getting the upgrade is a pretty big mistake. Like if you're not getting the speed and planning on using the Spitfires, you're probably doing it wrong. I think the upgrade takes too much time. Like it's more time than the Zergling speed. I think it's like over 2 minutes to get the calibrated engines. So I think the time for the upgrade could be lowered, but it's still a pretty important vital upgrade for the Genetron, considering like Spitfires will be the core of your composition most of the time.
Started early.
Yep. Like it probably should be like your first gas should be invested into an uploader and Spitfire speed probably. If you're not doing some kind of rush, for example, rush to the Hornet or something.
Now, you're not a big static defense guy, if I remember.
Yep, like I think building a lot of static defense might be a trap because you cannot move out with your static defense, and if you spend the resources on the army instead, you can probably just go and kill your opponent if he has low unit count, let's say. But at the same time, I agree with players that say that Genetron static defense is pretty good, maybe the best in the game right now, because like the repulsors and the interdictors are really pretty strong. I wish there were some, as I said, more, let's call it defenders mechanics apart from building static defense. But I still think I would not try to overinvest into the static defense. But of course, it's pretty useful when you're trying to defend your outlying bases. Maybe like when you have 4 or more bases, you would probably need to be building repulsor to like deal with run-bys and this kind of stuff.
One of the fan favorite units has got to be the Jupiter. What are your thoughts on the Jupiter and its current iteration?
So recently we've got a patch that introduced a lot of nerfs to the unit. Prior to the patch, I would say I hated the unit because it was pretty oppressive. Like I could be prepared. I could have like 3 or more missile turrets ready for the unit to come, and it was still like so fast and so durable that will drop the bomb, kill my workers if I didn't react pretty fast, and it will be gone, not killed. And right now it has like less armor. I think also it makes the workers panic, meaning they run from the fire.
Yeah, that's huge, eh?
Yeah, like it is not a worker killer anymore, really. Like it still can kill workers, but workers basically run away on their own. So it's not an super effective harassment unit right now. Also, I was having like my problems with the unit because it seemed like it's too good for killing workers, but at the same time it was pretty useless in like army versus army situations. But then again, Jotak showed me that as long as the army is big enough, like in later stages of the game, you can have some Jupiters dropping the bombs on like a death ball, and it's pretty damn good. Like actually, I think the Jupiter is kind of like death ball breaker because as long as an opponent has a big clump of units, the bombs will probably decimate his army.
It's a bit like a storm in late game.
Yes, exactly.
What about
Jupiter is a pretty durable unit, so it doesn't die really. It doesn't die that much. Like 200 HP and still 1 armor. It's pretty good for a unit this kind.
And if you want to deal with Jupiters in a GVG, you probably need to be making some Torrents. And I know a lot of players are a little bit resistant to making those right now.
Yep, that's one of my problems with the unit as well. I think I've stated that in the comments under your most recent video, of me at least, that the Torrent is a pretty binary unit. Like it's an amazing killer of all aircraft units, but at the same time it's like a noodle cannon versus ground units. Like it would be a pretty big shame for any ground unit to be actually killed with a Torrent. It's amazing versus all the air units except for the high armor like capital ships, like battle cruiser carrier. But versus ground units, I would have like anything else. So I'm always like, I'm cautious not to build too much of them, but it's a pretty thin line because you don't have enough of them, you die to air. You have too much of them, you die to ground. And what I wished happened was if Solstice introduced some kind of utility tool for the unit, maybe something that can be used defensively, for example, place some kind of mine, for defense or maybe of I don't know some scouting ability, this kind of stuff. Hard to say really what's needed, but I wish the unit has more utility or at least some more anti-ground capabilities because it's amazing versus air, but a complete waste of money versus ground.
Well, we'll stay tuned and see what the future holds. I think one of the abilities we didn't touch on is mining priority. Can you explain what that is and how it fits into the game?
So basically as a Genetron, I always feel broke. I wish I could say it's because my macro is so good. I never have any mineral bank. But at the same time, I just think Genetron stuff is really expensive. Like most of the time, I'm doing trade-offs. For example, I'm delaying my upgrade just to have more units, which is probably pretty bad. So Genetron is always broke, in my opinion. And the mining priority is an ability on the processing core that should make it better, like economy-wise. I think it was like the strength of suggestion because I was thinking, yeah, it's really like doing good job. I feel the income. But then like recently Solstice posted a message on the Discord server. And by the way, I invite all of the listeners and watchers of this video to join our Discord server. So Solstice stated that the mining priority actually gives you like 32 minerals and like 15 gas total, and I was like totally taken aback because 32 minerals is like nothing. So it turns out the ability is pretty useless right now, and we were like theory crafting, like basically it could be like the amount could be tripled or quadrupled or quintupled, and it would still be like maybe only okay because
it's
like
no
Terran Mule. Yeah, Terran Mule collects what? 240, 270, I think. So 270 is a nice boost to the economy, and at the same time, 32 minerals is like no boost to the economy. So I just wish in the future the ability will be reworked or just plainly buffed, like 5 times the amount.
Well, we'll go easy on our devs here because I know they're doing their best to look at everybody's ideas and they've been incredibly responsive. It's crazy how the Scion races get patched so much faster than the originals. Anyways, we've got time for one last question, and I was wondering if you could tell us how you got involved in the Scion StarCraft races to begin with.
Basically, the story is I quit the StarCraft in like 2016. I used to be an ESL Poland caster. I was casting some pretty big offline events like Intel Extreme Masters Katowice twice, the Intel Extreme Masters from China as well, some kind of also WCS events, for example, the WCS finals in Krakow in Poland. Basically, I spent a lot of time with StarCraft, and after some time when I think it was shortly after the Legacy of the Void came out, I basically got burned out on the hobby. I was starting doing some other stuff. For example, I focused on my studies, became a software developer, this kind of stuff. Because in that time I didn't really make a lot of money out of casting StarCraft, let's say. So yeah, for me, the game became pretty stale, let's call it that. Like after the years of playing the game, basically I thought I've already seen everything. And then suddenly I found out the Scion races, three new, completely new, unexplored, undiscovered races. So that was pretty exciting for me because I like experimenting with stuff. I like coming up with new strategies. With the Zerg, Terran, and Protoss, I think we've already seen everything. But with the new races, like sky is the limit.
Sky is the limit. You're going to be a Sky Genetron player then, I take it. Anyways, thank you so much, Sigmar, for taking the time to talk to us about the Genetron, and thank you to everyone who took the time to join us. Sigmar is going to be watching the comments, and he tells me he'll be happy to field anyone's questions, so don't hesitate to give us your thoughts or join us in the Scion Races Discord sometime. Good night, everyone.